I am a man of metrics, of synaptic responses, neurotransmitter levels, and the rigid, comforting architecture of the human brain. My name is Dr. Aris Thorne. If you look up my name, you'll find papers on pediatric neurology, studies on how the frontal cortex develops in the first decade of life. You will find logic. You will find reason. What you won't find, what I have spent the last 6 months trying to scrub from my own memory, is the impossibility that now lives in my house. It started, as most life-altering tragedies do, on a Tuesday. A mundane, gray Tuesday in November. I remember the weather because the rain was hitting the window of my study with a rhythmic, frantic tapping, like 1,000 fingers trying to get in. My son, Elian, was 6 years old. I need you to understand who Elian was before. He was quiet. He liked blue trucks, the taste of strawberries, and the feeling of velvet against his cheek. He was terrified of loud noises. He was, by every medical definition, a neurotypical, healthy, slightly introverted boy. There was no trauma, no head injury, no history of psychosis in our family tree. I checked. God, did I check. I went back 3 generations, hunting for a ghost. For a genetic glitch that could explain why my son disappeared while his body remained. That Tuesday evening, I was reviewing patient charts. The house was warm, smelling faintly of the roasted chicken my wife, Sarah, had made for dinner. The domesticity of it was suffocatingly normal. Daddy? I turned my chair. Elian was standing in the doorway. He was wearing his favorite pajamas, dinosaurs piloting spaceships. He was clutching his stuffed bear, Mr. Paws, by the arm. Hey, buddy, I said, softening my voice. The transition from doctor to dad was usually seamless. Shouldn't you be asleep? It's past 8. Elian didn't move. He didn't blink. That was the first thing that prickled the hair on the back of my neck. Usually, when he got out of bed, he was sheepish. But he stood there with a posture that felt wrong. Too upright. Too rigid for a child whose bones were still growing. The wood is too rough, Elian whispered. I frowned, taking off my glasses. What wood, Elian? Your bed frame? He shook his head slowly. It wasn't a child's shake. It was a weary, heavy movement. The crossbeam. It's not sanded. It tears the skin. The silence that followed was heavy. The rain tapped harder against the glass. I laughed, a short, nervous exhale. Did you have a bad dream, bud? About construction? Elian walked into the room. He didn't walk like a 6-year-old. He didn't scuff his feet. He moved with a heavy, purposeful stride, as if his legs were carrying a weight I couldn't see. He stopped at my desk and looked at the anatomy poster on my wall. A diagram of the nervous system. They didn't know about the nerves then, he said. His voice was still his high, breathy, childish, but the cadence was different. It was flatter. Older. They just knew it hurt. They knew if they hit the wrist here. He reached up, his small, sticky finger tracing the median nerve on the poster. The hand curls like a claw. It locks. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my spine. Elian, where did you hear that? Did you see something on TV? Did Mommy let you watch the medical channel? He looked at me then. His eyes are green. Bright, vibrant green. But in the yellow light of my desk lamp, they looked dark. Ancient. I didn't watch it, Aris, he said. He called me Aris. Not Daddy. Not Dad. Aris. I felt it, he whispered. The sun was so hot. The flies, they were the worst part. They don't wait for you to die. I stood up, my chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. The sound made him jump, and suddenly, the presence, or whatever that heaviness was, vanished. Elian blinked, his face crumpling into confusion. He looked at me, then at his bear, then back to me, his lip trembling. Daddy? Why are you standing up? He whimpered. I had a bad dream. I rushed to him, scooping him up, burying my face in his neck. He smelled like baby shampoo and milk. He was my boy. He was just my boy. It's okay, I whispered, rocking him. It's just a nightmare. It's not real. None of it is real. But as I held him, I looked over his shoulder at the window. My reflection stared back. A man of science, clutching a child who had just described the precise physiological reaction of a crucifixion, with the apathy of an executioner. That was the first crack in the glass. For the next week, I monitored him. I became a hawk. I analyzed his sleep patterns, his diet, his screen time. I convinced myself it was a fluke. But the sensory details he started mentioning were hyper-specific. Dinner 3 days later. We were having fish. This isn't right, Elian murmured. Sarah smiled. I know, honey, it's tilapia, not fish sticks, but try it. Elian dropped the fork. It clattered loudly against the china. No, he said, staring at the fish. The fish from the sea, the big sea, they are salter. And we dry them on the rocks. We have to dry them fast, or the heat rots them before we get to the city. Sarah stopped eating. Elian, what are you talking about? What city? Elian looked up. His eyes were distant again. That 1,000-yard stare that soldiers have. Capernaum, he said. The word rolled off his tongue with a guttural, thick accent that did not belong in a suburb of Ohio. The tax collector is there today. We have to hide the catch. Elian, stop it, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm not Elian, he said matter-of-factly. He looked at his hands, his small, smooth, 6-year-old hands. He looked disappointed. My hands are too soft. I can't pull the nets with ease. They'll bleed. Elian! I snapped. He blinked, snapping back to the present. He looked at the fork, then at me. Can I have ketchup? Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. I signaled her to stay calm. Children have active imaginations, I mouthed to her. It's a phase. But that night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with a glass of scotch, staring at the darkness. I pulled out my laptop and typed Capernaum into the search bar. An ancient fishing village on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Destroyed centuries ago. I looked at the images of the ruins. The black basalt rocks. I closed the laptop. Coincidence, I told myself. He heard the name in Sunday school. Except, we don't go to church. We are atheists. We have never owned a Bible. The haunting began in earnest the following Monday. I decided to treat it as a puzzle. That's what doctors do. We don't believe in ghosts, we believe in symptoms. If a patient describes pain in a phantom limb, we don't look for the spirit of the leg, we look at the nerve endings in the stump. We look at the map in the brain. So, I started mapping Elian. For 3 days following the Capernaum incident, silence returned. But even at the park I saw it. He wasn't swinging like the other children. He was sitting on the rubber seat, staring at his sandals. He was picking up handfuls of sand and letting it sift through his fingers. Just sifting. Watching the dust blow in the wind. I walked over. Hey, want to go down the slide? He didn't look up. The sand is too clean, he murmured. It doesn't have the red in it. Red? From the stones, he said. When they throw them. My stomach turned over. I grabbed his swing, stopping it abruptly. Who throws stones, Elian? He looked at me, and for a split second, the boy vanished again. The old man, the weary man, was back behind his eyes. Everyone, he whispered. When the crowd gets angry, you have to cover your head. I took him home immediately. That night, I went into his room while he was sleeping. I sat in the armchair in the corner, watching his chest rise and fall. Then, his legs began to move. Not the jerky kicks of a dream, but a rhythmic motion. Left, right. Left, right. Like he was walking. A long, arduous walk. His breathing changed. It became ragged, desperate. He was panting, though he was lying perfectly still in a 70-degree room. Sweat broke out on his forehead. He grimaced, his teeth gritting together so hard I could hear the enamel grinding. I stood up to wake him. But my hand stopped inches from his shoulder. He began to hum. It was a low, mournful melody. It wasn't a nursery rhyme. It was a dirge. A minor key, oscillating between 3 notes. It sounded like something you would hear echoing in a canyon, or a stone chamber. I pulled out my phone. Document everything. I opened the voice recorder app and pressed the red button. The humming stopped. Elian turned his head on the pillow, facing the wall. They took the cloak, he whispered. The voice was raspy, parched. I told them it was woven in one piece. Do not tear it. Please. It's all I have left of her. I froze. Woven in one piece. I knew that phrase. Somewhere, deep in the recesses of cultural osmosis, I knew that specific detail. I backed out of the room. I went to my study. I typed the phrase into the browser. Tunic woven in one piece. The results loaded instantly. John 19 verse 23. When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes. The undergarment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. I stared at the screen until the white light burned my retinas. My 6-year-old son, who thinks Easter is about a bunny and chocolate eggs, was quoting the Gospel of John in his sleep. But he wasn't quoting it like a verse. He was pleading. The logic was fracturing. The diagnosis was slipping away. The next morning, the drawings began. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of paper crinkling. Sarah was at the counter, her back to me, staring at the kitchen table. Aris, look at this. Elian was sitting at the table. He was holding a black charcoal pencil. The paper in front of him was covered in dense, frantic strokes. It wasn't a stick figure family. It was a crowd. Hundreds of tiny, faceless figures, sketched with violent, jagged energy. Swarming around a central point. Elian, I said, my voice trembling. What is this? He didn't look up. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The charcoal snapped. The courtyard, he said. They are waiting for the decision. What decision, buddy? Life or death, he murmured. He picked up a red crayon. They chose the robber. They always choose the violent one. They like the show. Sarah grabbed my arm. Aris, he's been doing this for an hour. He won't stop. I stepped closer. Elian, look at me. He stopped. He turned his head slowly. The sweet boy was gone. The weary traveler was in control. Why do you stop the record? He asked me. It must be written down. Luke is not here. Someone must write it. Who is Luke? The physician, Elian said, staring at my stethoscope. He asked too many questions. Like you? But he wasn't there for the trial. He needs to know about the blood. I pulled my hand back. Sarah, get the thermometer. Now. I dragged Elian away from the table. You're sick, Elian. You have a fever. I am not sick, he said, his voice rising, cracking with an emotion that sounded like grief. I am thirsty. He screamed the last word. I am thirsty. It didn't sound like thirst for water. It sounded like the cry of a man dying in the sun. We laid him on the sofa. 104.2 degrees. I held a glass of cold water to Elian's lips. He slapped it away. The glass shattered on the floor. Not that! Elian shouted. He grabbed the front of my shirt. His breath smelled metallic. Like iron. Like old blood. Pasca, he hissed. They give me vinegar and gall. On a sponge. Don't you see it? It burns my throat. I pried his fingers off my shirt. Sarah, get the car keys. We're going to the hospital. No, I said. The hospital will sedate him. They'll label him within an hour. I know a specialist. A linguist. I wasn't taking him to a doctor. I was taking him to the only person who could identify the language he had been muttering. My old college roommate Marcus. Because as Elian lay there, thrashing in the fever, he wasn't speaking English anymore. He was speaking a language of guttural stops and rolling R's. I sent a recording to Marcus. The response came 3 minutes later. Aris, get him here. Now. He's reciting Psalm 22. But he's reciting it in Aramaic. And the dialect, it's 1st century Galilean. Nobody speaks that. Nobody. I looked in the rearview mirror. Elian was staring out the window at the suburban houses. Everything has changed, he whispered to the glass. The temple is gone. Not one stone left on another. I gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't driving a car anymore. I was piloting a vessel across an ocean of time, and the storm was just beginning. We arrived at the university. Room 304. I kicked the door open. Marcus was staring at his computer screen. When he saw us, he stood up so fast his chair toppled over. Aris, he breathed. Is he sedated? Exhausted, I said, laying Elian down on the leather sofa. Marcus approached slowly. It's street Aramaic, Aris. It's coarse. It's a peasant's dialect from the Galilee region, circa 30 AD. You can't fake this. Elian's eyes fluttered open. The room went silent. He sat up. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Marcus. You have the scroll upside down, Elian said. Marcus blinked, looking at the framed replica of the great Isaiah scroll on his wall. Excuse me? The words? Elian pointed a shaking finger. You hung it for the beauty, not the reading. The ending is at the top. Marcus turned to look. My God, he's right. Marcus turned back to Elian, his hands trembling. He spoke a sentence in Aramaic. Peace be upon you, child. What is your name? Elian replied instantly. There is no peace here. Only the waiting. We are waiting for the stone to roll. Marcus gasped. Aris, he's using idioms that haven't been spoken in 2,000 years. A 6-year-old cannot know that. Elian stood up. He walked over to a display case. Inside was a collection of Roman coins. This one is wrong, he said, tapping on the glass. Marcus moved to his side. That's a denarius. From the reign of Tiberius. It's historically accurate. No. Elian shook his head. The image. Caesar's nose was more hooked. And the silver, it was thinner. When you dropped it on the table, it didn't ring. It sounded dead. Thud. Like lead. Elian looked at Marcus with those terrifyingly old eyes. Judas didn't want them at first. Did you know that? He threw them back. They scattered on the floor of the temple. 30 of them. I counted them. I was hiding behind the pillar. I felt the blood drain from my face. You were hiding? Elian turned to me. I was small. Like I am now. I followed the teacher because he gave me bread. The barley bread. It was hard, but he softened it with water for me. He looked at his hands again. I saw him take the money. Judas. He was crying. Why does nobody say he was crying? He didn't want to do it. The priests, they threatened his sister. Marcus dropped his notepad. There is no record of that, he whispered. They held her in the tower, Elian said, tears beginning to stream down his face. The Antonia fortress. I heard her screaming. That's why he did it. To save her. But they killed her anyway. The silence in the room was absolute. I need to ask him about the cross, Marcus said, his voice shaking. Don't, I warned. But Elian answered before Marcus could ask. It wasn't tall, Elian whispered. We both looked at him. The paintings, Elian said, looking at a print on the wall. They always painted high. Like he is in the sky. But he wasn't. Elian walked to the center of the room. He held his arms out. His feet were right here. Elian pointed to my chest level. Just off the ground. So the dogs could get to him. That's how the Romans did it. To shame you. You weren't above the people. You were face to face with them. He looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. I could smell his sweat. I could hear him gasping. He looked at me, Aris, He looked right at me. Who? I choked out. Yeshua. Elian breathed. He looked at me and he said. Elian's eyes rolled back in his head. His knees buckled. I caught him. He was convulsing. Wait! Marcus shouted. Look at his back! I looked. Elian was wearing a thin pajama top. But on his back, staining the fabric from the inside out, were lines. Red lines. Like lash marks. Stigmata, Marcus whispered. No! I roared. It's psychosomatic! But as I looked at the marks, the scientist in me died. The marks weren't random. They were the pattern of a Roman flagrum. And they were healing right before our eyes. Elian gasped, a huge intake of air, and his eyes snapped open. The old man was gone. Daddy? He whispered, his voice tiny. My back hurts. I hugged him. I looked up at Marcus. The professor was weeping silently. We need to go to the site, Marcus said, wiping his eyes. If he is connected, we need to prove it once and for all. Elian mentioned a hiding place. The coins. There is an excavation happening right now in Jerusalem. If he knows what's inside that structure before they open it, then science has to bow. The heat in Jerusalem is different. It presses down on your shoulders like a physical hand. We stood on the metal walkway overlooking the awful excavation site. It was night. Elian was holding my hand. He looked small against the massive Herodian stones. The team is down there, Marcus said. They found a first-century domestic structure. Elian let go of my hand. He walked to the railing. He pointed down to a dark corner covered in rubble. Not there. Elian's voice drifted over the wind. It was the old voice again. The jar is not in the room. It's in the cistern. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Sarid, looked up at us. Who is this child? Just listen to him, Marcus yelled. Elian gripped the railing. He threw it in the water, he whispered. To hide it. Because it was blood money. But the water dried up. I looked at my son. Who threw it, Elian? Judas, he said. The name came out with a sob. He didn't want the priest to have it back. So he threw the bag into the old well behind the weaving house. Elian looked at Dr. Sarid. Dig 3 meters to the left. Under the gray stone. The stone with the crack like a lightning bolt. Slowly, she signaled to her team. They moved the gray stone. Underneath, there was loose earth. Clink. The sound of metal hitting pottery. Dr. Sarid froze. She pulled out a clay vessel. She cracked the seal and tilted it. Something poured out onto the dust. Silver. Blackened, oxidized, ancient silver coins. Dr. Sarid picked one up. Tyrian shekels, she choked out. The required currency for the temple tax. She counted them. 1, 2, 29, 30. 30 pieces of silver. Found exactly where a 6-year-old boy from Ohio said they would be. I fell to my knees. The logic, the science, they all dissolved. I was staring at the price of a god. But Elian wasn't looking at the coins. He was looking at the sky. He's here, Elian whispered. The air around us changed. A cool breeze swept through. Elian turned to me. His face was glowing. Daddy, he said. He wants you to know. Know what? I wept. Elian reached out and touched my forehead. The equation is wrong, Elian said gently. You look for the end of the brain. You think the light goes out. But the light doesn't come from the brain, Aris. The brain is just the radio. The signal is eternal. He closed his eyes. He says, I did not come to start a religion. I came to break the cycle. You are still throwing stones. You are still building crosses. Stop. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He says, love is not a chemical reaction. It is the fabric. It is the only thing that holds the atoms together. If you stop loving, the universe unravels. The breeze swirled around us one last time. I felt a presence, vast, ancient, and terrifyingly kind, passed through me. Then Elian gasped. His knees gave way. I caught him. He blinked, looking around wildly. Daddy? His voice was high normal. Where are we? I want to go home. I want Mr. Paws. I pulled him into my chest, rocking him on the metal walkway above the ruins of history. The coins were still there, scattered in the dirt. But I was holding the future. We're going home, buddy. I sobbed into his hair. We're going home.